In countries where organ donation is the legal default, where a person must opt out to refuse, registered donor rates run far higher than in countries that require an active opt-in. That contrast is the core result from Johnson and Daniel Goldstein's comparative work, including their 2003 paper in the journal Science. They examined national registries across Europe and showed that the gap tracks the starting rule on the form more than any large difference in stated support for donation. Surveys in both kinds of systems often report broad willingness to give organs after death. What separates the populations is the administrative path. Consent is typically recorded through a low-attention act, a checkbox on a driver's license form, a mailed declaration left unfinished, a registry entry people mean to update later. When the preset answer is donation, most people never reverse it. When the preset answer is non-donation, most people never reverse that either. The default becomes the population answer because the extra step is friction many never overcome. Magnitudes differ by country, by how easy exit is, and by how registries are kept, and researchers continue to argue over design details and what presumed consent means in practice. The qualitative pattern has been widely replicated. Opt-out systems produce much higher effective registration than opt-in systems, even when public opinion looks broadly similar. The visceral point is simple. Neighbors who voice similar ethics about helping strangers after death can end up on opposite sides of the donor pool mainly because of how the checkbox was written. The same architecture governs retirement money. In a 2001 field study, economists Bridget Madrian and Dennis Shea examined what happened when a large U.S. employer switched its 401k from requiring active sign-up to automatic enrollment. Workers were placed in the plan unless they opted out. Participation among new hires rose sharply relative to otherwise comparable cohorts under the old rules. Extensive follow-on research on workplace retirement plans has found the same qualitative result again and again. Automatic enrollment produces much higher take-up than voluntary enrollment even when the match, the fund menu, and the written advice stay essentially unchanged. The cause is not a sudden conversion to thrift. Enrollment means paperwork, a contribution rate, and a choice among funds many workers find opaque. Those steps cost attention, so people postpone them. Under opt-in rules, postponement leaves them out. Under automatic enrollment, postponement leaves them in at the employer's preset rate and default fund. Richard Thaler, Cass Sunstein, and later choice architecture research framed the pattern as inertia meeting complexity rather than as workers revising their stated savings goals. Over years of compounding, the gap becomes material. Take-home pay can look similar. Employer matching formulas can be identical. Conversations about retirement can sound the same. Yet the balance that accumulates often tracks the form's starting point more closely than any fresh decision the worker made. A default can rewrite lifetime balances while take-home pay, advice, and stated goals stay roughly the same. The same pattern runs through the devices people carry every day. Human-computer interaction work, privacy research, and competition cases have long found that users overwhelmingly leave factory defaults in place on phones, browsers, search engines, and privacy toggles. The mechanism is ordinary inertia meeting design that never forces a fresh decision. Out of the box, a phone already opens a browser, routes search, fills notifications, and sets which apps handle mail, maps, and messages. Those choices work well enough that nothing breaks if they stay put. Revising them means hunting through nested menus, comparing options that feel technical, and accepting a short stretch of friction for a benefit that is hard to feel in the moment. So most people never finish the rewrite. The vendor's starting configuration becomes the lived environment, not because it was ranked first after careful comparison, but because it was already running. That stickiness is why default apps, pre-installed tools, and pre-ticked consent boxes turned into regulatory flashpoints in Europe and elsewhere. Competition authorities treated the starting slot on a handset or browser as a commercial prize, not a neutral technical detail. Privacy rules pushed back on consent obtained by a box already checked, on the ground that inattention is not agreement. Switching remained possible. It simply was not pushed into attention. What looks like a personal setup is often an inheritance. Most people do not so much choose their digital settings as inherit them. Even the ballot bends to layout. Political science reviews and a long run of election studies find a ballot order effect. Candidates listed first often receive a measurable edge over otherwise similar names placed lower on the page, especially in lower information races. The size of that edge depends on the office, the electoral system, and how much voters already know. It is real on average without being always decisive. Some jurisdictions rotate name order across precincts or ballot versions precisely to blunt it. Platforms do not have to change. Ads do not have to change. The administrative sequence of names is enough to move a slice of the tally. The mechanism is not mystical. Under uncertainty, some voters satisfice. When other signals are weak, long primary lists, obscure local offices, nonpartisan contests, crowded columns, list position itself becomes a cue. The eye meets the first name first. Recognition and mild familiarity tilt a fraction of marks toward whoever sits at the top. People with strong, preformed preferences are less moved. The edge concentrates where attention is thinner and comparison costs more. Administrative order converts into votes without rewriting incentives or ideologies. That is the counterintuitive hit. Voting is treated as the emblem of conscious preference, the deliberate act in a democracy. Yet the same quiet architecture that steers organ registries, pension enrollment, and phone settings shows up on the form that records a choice of government. Democracy's purest deliberate act still carries a quiet imprint of the form's layout. People can mean what they mark and still inherit a small push from which name the rules put first. When a utility sets renewable electricity as the default tariff and treats gray power as the option that needs an active switch, uptake of green tariffs rises sharply next to otherwise similar opt-in programs. Field experiments with European energy suppliers and the energy economics and behavioral policy work that followed them show the gap repeatedly. A 2015 field experiment by Felix Ebeling and Sebastian Lotz, published in Nature Climate Change, assigned German households at random to contracts where green power either arrived unless cancelled or had to be chosen. Staying on the renewable default produced far higher green enrollment than asking people to opt in. Earlier work by Pitchert and Katsakopoulos and related studies in Swiss and other European utility markets found the same architecture at work. The tariff that is already in force becomes the tariff most customers keep. Switching remains allowed. Few people do it. Price frames and branding move some decisions at the margin, but the decisive lever is usually which contract lands first. Comparing generation mixes, verifying labels, and filing a change all cost attention. Inertia plus a preset green option therefore rewrites the population's power mix without a sudden conversion of environmental values. Survey support for cleaner electricity can look broadly similar across groups that end up burning very different fuel. Households with similar green attitudes can still run on different power mixes mainly because of the tariff they never changed. The starting contract, not a fresh wave of activism, moves the aggregate footprint. William Samuelson and Richard Zeckhauser named the shared pattern in a 1988 paper in the Journal of Risk and Uncertainty. People stick with the arrangement already in place, the status quo, even when other options look attractive and the cost of switching looks low. In their experiments, subjects chose among policies, investments, and jobs more often when an option was framed as the current state than when the same option sat as one choice among equals. Later laboratory work and field studies have found the same tilt again and again. The mechanism is not only crude laziness. Comparing alternatives costs attention. Uncertainty makes the familiar feel safer. A loss that follows an active switch can feel heavier than a loss that simply continues. So when a form, a contract, a menu, or a list already points one way, inertia does more than delay a decision. It selects the outcome. That is why starting rules move organ registries, retirement balances, device environments, low information ballots, and electricity mixes while survey values often stay broadly similar. Across those domains, preference is partly constructed by the path of least resistance the designer hands out. Legislators, employers, manufacturers, election clerks, and utilities set what happens if nobody acts, and nobody acting is common. Agency is not erased. People can still opt out, change a plan, rewrite settings, mark another name, or pick a different tariff. Many never do. The quiet form of power is the authority to choose that default. If free choice still leaves life-shaping outcomes to checkboxes, designing the starting point is designing the likely life. The life most people keep is often the one nobody asked them to refuse.